Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here today. This is Eric MacDonald and Jose Idrak from Braver Technologies. We'll be presenting this webinar here today along with the Huntress team. We're going to be going over EDR and MDR, like 101 Cybersecurity Essentials, and discussing ways that you can strengthen your cyber defense. Please be aware that we also have a YouTube, and we are going to be uploading both this webinar, previous webinars, and future conversations and materials to our YouTube channel. Please feel free to check that out if you find this information helpful or interesting. As a brief introduction to ourselves, here at Braver Technologies, we are a managed services provider in the greater Boston, southeastern Massachusetts area, and all of Rhode Island. We provide a number of services for our clients. While this list might not be exhaustive, I would like you to know that these are some of our areas of specialty, some of the areas and some of the industries that we work with most in depth and that we have a ton of experience with. Launching into this conversation today, I think it gives us a great starting point to sort of discuss what some of these cyber threats are that industries need to protect themselves against. Again, not an exhaustive list, but some of the most pertinent and relevant topics that we'll be attempting to protect against using cybersecurity solutions. That includes things such as ransomware attacks, phishing, advanced persistent threats, malware and viruses, insider threats, zero-day exploits, and data exfiltration. And I'd actually like to hand it off to Jose a little bit just to talk about some of the nuances of each of these.
Thank you, Eric. My name is Jose, part of the engineering team here at Braver, and I'm going to be defining a few of the cyber threats that we think are the most high-level things that we see every day. Thank you for the Huntress team to be with us. Kyle and Andrew, appreciate all of your help throughout all of this. So cyber threats, we're going to start with phishing attacks. That's a type of online scam that involves tricking people into revealing personal information, such as passwords, bank information, credit card numbers. It's a deceive email that tricks to give out personal information. Then we're going to define ransomware attacks. It's a type of malware that prevents users from accessing their devices and data by encrypting their files and then demanding ransom for their decryption. You can get it by downloading files, clicking on bad links, and so forth. And again, we have the advanced persistent threats. Those are sustained cyber attacks in which an intruder establishes an undetected presence in your network in order to steal sensitive data over a prolonged period of time. An ATP attack is carefully planned and designed to infiltrate a specific organization, evade existing security measures, and fly under the radar. So malware and viruses, it stands for malicious software and refers to any type of software designed to harm a computer system, while a virus is a specific type of malware that can self-replicate itself and inject its code into other programs, effectively spreading from one computer to the other. And you could get it from unsafe downloads and attachments in emails. Insider threats. That's a cybersecurity risk that occurs when someone with authorized access to a company's data or systems intentionally or unintentionally harms an organization. Insider threats can come from a variety of people, including employees, contractors, partners, vendors, interns. Zero-day exploits is a cyber attack that takes advantage of software or hardware vulnerabilities that are unknown to the public, even to the vendors or developers. That's how the zero-day terms comes into fact, because there's still no fix from the vendors to fix the flaw that the attackers are exploiting. When we talk about data exfiltration, it's an unauthorized file transfer of data from a device or a network. And it's also known as data extrusion, data exportation or data leakage. Unauthorized access occurs when someone gains access to a system, network, or data without permission or exceeds their authorized access. It takes place when poor controls are in place or weak passwords for someone are in place. So these days, EDR alone is not often the efficient practice. So we are complementing EDR with MDR solutions, and that significantly enhances their cybersecurity posture, protecting their assets from external hackers and internal risks. And now I'm going to pass it back to Eric. Thank you so much.
So we'll start with EDR, which is the Endpoint Detection and Response. This is usually the first attempt that you would make into trying to get your hands around and resolve these problems that we've talked about. They have a few key features that you really should be aware of, and this sort of goes across all of the EDR type solutions. Those usually consist of automated endpoint monitoring, so essentially filtering, grabbing data, and feeding them back to a system so that you can review it. Part of that might be automated remediation or blocking things automatically on their own accord, without necessarily human intervention, going through and generating reports, of unique behaviors, unique things that have been observed within the fleet of endpoints that EDR is managing. And then EDRs oftentimes provide tooling so that individuals on the IT team in the organization might be able to try to find things that might be common among malicious things. So if they get an incident response for one thing, they might be able to hunt for that along other devices or other segments of the business. The EDR solution isn't necessarily perfect because there are a lot of caveats to EDR that we'll get into a little bit later, but we'll talk about what EDR is becoming. So today, EDRs have started to evolve more into MDRs, which stands for Managed Detection and Response. The Managed Detection and Response is the next phase where you essentially take an EDR solution, sometimes multiple EDR solutions for different products, and you begin to feed all of that information back into a service or a system where you have skilled individuals, skilled engineers, specific skill sets focused on interpreting, reviewing, and working within that tool set in order to protect the organization across all of those EDR solutions that they might be managing. It is sort of the true skill up of what would be sort of the naive EDR. And if we continue on to the next slide, the caveats that we'll get to on the EDR side is businesses are oftentimes scattered. You have a lot of individual segments of your business, different locations, you have different types of assets, different fleet schemas, you have Macs, you have Windows devices, you have mobile devices, you have a ton of different things. And then you also have a need for skilled individuals as an individual business to be able to actually interpret the data. Having access to useful data isn't useful if you can't interpret it or use it. So you need to have skilled individuals who can actually interpret that. The response times are absolutely paramount for getting something that has been detected to be responded to. Automated detection and response isn't perfect. So if you have something that happens, but you don't respond to it because you're one or two IT people in-house, or at lunch, something might be way worse than if you actually had a team, a much larger organization or a managed solution. We've had a fleet or a huge segment of individuals watching this and being responsive on your behalf. The same type of caveat goes to the evolution of threats, where you may not see something, something might be completely new, and your team you might see it, it might be an incident, but your team, if they either don't have the knowledge or the exposure to something that's novel, they might just ignore or not think it's serious and might not take it seriously. It might just be new to them. So, and similarly, you can run into situations where you have false positives where something might not be malicious, so they might overreact and accidentally cause the business harm by responding to something that's not actually serious. Or they may be getting too many alerts for the one or two individuals that you have trying to manage the CDR, and then they will struggle. where they might just start to ignore, or, oh, I see that all the time, that's a non-issue, and they just sort of rubber stamp it, it's not a problem. And then one of those actually was serious, and then you could have a business compromise because of that type of a situation. But that's usually why businesses are struggling with EDR. So when we move on to MDR is when you start to resolve those problems by having a dedicated personnel team. And that is where I would like to introduce you to one of our partners who we actually work with some of our solutions, the Huntress team, who I will let take it from here as they talk about their answer to some of these problems that some businesses have had when they try to do this and roll their own like in-house IT team.
Perfect. No, I appreciate that, Eric. Thank you. So my name is Kyle Seda. I work for Huntress here. We actually partner very closely with Braver. On the call as well as Andrew Meyer. He is one of our engineers that I work very closely with. So I figured having both of us on today, just bring you guys some context to what we're talking about. So on the slide you see here, we do form this idea of a better approach to EDR. So very much in tow of what Eric and Jose have been talking about for the past couple of minutes is exactly what we do. And this is how we partner with them through our approach with an EDR as well as MDR. So we do take our approach with EDR to say it is a fully managed EDR, which means we do have a SOC operation team. So humans in seats 24/7, which allow us to provide expertise directly to what we're looking at for these tools, rather than it just being, hey, I need to go source an EDR. I need to source cybersecurity tools myself. But then once I get all these tools, how am I supposed to manage them? That's where we come in. That's where our partnerships with with your businesses like Braver, we work with them to provide these tools and to provide these outcomes. We take this approach with a headache free. So we mitigate the false positives, focusing more so on business security outcomes through our processes and what we have as far as how we look at all of the data that comes in from our tools. And then it gives us a perfect marriage of technology and service, which allows us to provide security-focused outcomes, take a lot of that workload off of everybody else within what I'll call the supply chain, from this vendor to IT to the end clients, which would be all of you here listening today. Obviously, we don't expect you guys to be experts. That's not your job. Your businesses are focused on where your expertise lies, and that's what we do here as a security company. So our ability to partner with Braver allows us to focus on our expertise, allows them to focus on their expertise to provide you guys with that outcome that helps you not focusing on this expertise, but focusing on growing your own businesses, operating your businesses for what they're intended for, and knowing, hey, 24/7, whether I'm awake or I'm asleep, I'm covered and I'm protected. And I have people looking out for me that know what their outcomes are supposed to be. And if you can go to the next slide, please. So without getting very technical, we're going to talk about at a high level what Huntress is capable of doing from an EDR level. And it is managed, right? So managed just means that we do have that 24/7 team sitting over top, monitoring and taking action. Basically, if you guys think of it in a nutshell, your computers, everything that goes on with technology is just a flying ball of data going everywhere. And until someone pulls it in and actually dissects it, called contextualizing it, then they're able to kind of see and whittle down what's going on with all that data. And that's where having a tool like EDR comes in, and having a team that management pays attention to it. So there's a lot going on here, but I'll just kind of break it down through these 5 categories with the first 2 on the left, the little portlets or squares, if you will. So this is all the technology. This is what we're looking at, and this is where we're going to get more into a deep dive of understanding. And I'll pass that over to Andrew here in a second to kind of talk about what we're doing from an endpoint threat detection, which is basically EDR, as well as antivirus, and how we look at all of that. But the human-led investigation in the middle is our 24/7 team. That's the team that we're working, that what Braver's doing, and how we're doing in that SOC function for you guys. And then communication and remediation. This is how that SOC team communicates in general. So the alerts that you'll see, how it's all digested when the data comes in and what they're looking to do. It's multiple layers of communication through creating tickets for techs to work on, through email communication, phone call communication, providing context for what we're seeing instead of just going, hey, I have this alert, but what does it mean, right? Turning it into I call it plain text English, right? If I had to read it in a book, could I understand it? Being able to provide that level of outcome to say, hey, A happened, you need to do B and C to remediate, and here's how we're going to do that. So in a very quick nutshell, that's what this page kind of describes. I'll actually pass it over to Andrew for the next slide to talk a little bit more about the technology behind what we're doing.
Yeah, so Everybody here has kind of highlighted the big piece, and when we talk about EDRs in general, the best way that I always say is this is like a camera system. You can have camera systems pointing at everything, looking at everything, and ultimately that's what we're doing on the endpoint. We're looking at all the potential processes and network behavior that are going through that actual endpoint itself. We're looking for those things that are hanging out, those persistent footholds, or those pieces of software that got locked into that environment that allow a threat actor to come back. We then expand that detection to catch those anomalies or things that are happening. And as we mentioned, right, ransomware being one of those potential threats, there has to be a way to be able to detect when that potential event does occur. So we have canaries that are put in place. These are tripwires designed so that we get that early indication of potential ransomware event occurring. And then lastly, we look at open ports. So we're looking at your endpoints, we're looking at that system itself, but what is the outside look like? Does it look like potentially a threat actor could come into that environment? And when you look at all of these pieces, right, and you put them all together, that's a lot of stuff to have to go through and investigate and figure out, is it good, is it bad? And ultimately, right, you as an SMB or even us, we have to go through this data set. We have to find that type of tactic and then determine, hey, is this actually malicious or not? And we weed through all of that. If you flip on to the next slide here, these are all human-led investigations. So instead of those alerts or those detections of, hey, potentially one of those endpoints has something going on or has something malicious, we're ultimately going through that actual triage for you. We're going through that instant investigation. We're going through and looking for potential new threats or those 0 days that potentially you don't know is bad yet. You don't know that there's actually a hole in the environment, but we see the behavior being malicious. And then we can always evolve that. So if you think about this human-led piece here, the big thing that Eric was highlighting there is that this takes a lot of manpower. This takes a lot of human intervention. This takes a lot of technology involved. And ultimately, all that means is a bunch of cost, a bunch of expertise that you need to hire or bring into the fold. So where Huntress comes in is that we're providing all of this on top of that EDR. Not only are we looking and detecting bad stuff happening, but we're going through all of that triage and ultimately making Braver have the ability to then see all of this incident, understand what's going on, rope that all into an incident report, and then take action upon it. Be able to actually provide that managed component to the detection and then response mechanism built in.
Appreciate that, Andrew. So we can just build this slide out and I'll kind of explain what we're going to talk about here in a second. So on top of EDR and watching your endpoints, right, you guys' workstations, the servers, part of the partnership we have with Braver is also looking at your Microsoft tenants or the identity aspect of what you guys have as far as what we need to look at from a security perspective. So similar to EDR, threat actors try to get into your email accounts. We've all heard of some form of phishing that's occurred where it's been detrimental to a business. I mean, I could name a certain casino, which I won't name, but we all know who I'm talking about. It happens, right? It happens to the best of us, and it happens all the way down to the people who just are not equipped to see like a Caesar's Palace, right? Those who have a full IT staff. It's phishing transcends across every aspect and every industry. How do you protect against it? There's a lot of ways. We're not going to tackle that topic completely today, but one way we look at it is we look beyond phishing. So what happens once you are phished? You know, what does that mean technically, right? Essentially, someone's pulling your credentials. They have your information now, and they can use that to their advantage and not even have to worry about the endpoint. They can do this all through your email. So one of the services that we work with Braver on is called the MDR for M365. It's an identity-related tool. So the same concept of a 24/7 covered SOC, focusing on high priority incidences, not on your endpoints, but within your email, right? So there's an acronym there called BEC. I'll explain what that is and kind of give a story to it. It's called business email compromise. So that's what happens even after a phish occurs and when they actually have your information, or it's one of the ways a threat actor can actually attack your accounts. What they can do under business email compromise is sit there and wait. They can watch and do mail forwarding rules. So if you've ever mail forwarded your work emails to your personal email because you needed to do something, and you have that setting automatically, once a threat actor has your information, they can do that same thing and you would never know it, monitoring your emails back and forth. Hopefully all of you on this call have never experienced this, but if you've heard the stories of, I was just sitting around, someone sent me a new request for funds to a vendor that we work with. the routing number changed, and I sent the money to the routing number, and $100,000 disappeared. Had no idea what happened, but they sent me that email and said, hey, here's a new routing number. And turns out that was a threat actor. So them sitting in between your emails and catching all that information, they're able to see, hey, this person emails this person for bills. And if I can intercept that email because I have access to their account, I'm going to be the one to step into the middle and say, hey, I'm so-and-so, and we actually changed how we get paid. Here's the new number. And gone without a trace is $100,000. That actually happened to my aunt at a business she worked for, a small medium business. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I live around a lot of NASCAR, and she worked for a race team, smaller race team, not the big ones you always see on TV, but they had an office, and the office manager had a vendor payment for $125,000. And that exact scenario happened. Someone was sitting in his inbox for over 90 days, and they basically pretended to be the person requesting payment. He sent the money, and next thing he knew, that vendor was calling them the next day asking for payment. And he's like, no, I paid you. Nope, different person, change the routing number. It's that easy. It can happen before you know it. And it is hard to detect unless you have a tool in place. If we can actually run to the next slide here. So this is where this tool comes in. We're looking at a very similar screen. And I'll let Andrew kind of explain a little bit more of the technology, what we're doing here. But again, from human-led investigation all the way to the right of remediation, it's the same concepts that apply that we've been talking about with EDR. And that's why we choose, that's why Braver chooses to partner with us for what we do from endpoint and from the identity perspective, because we're all working together within the same SOC team and the same MDR staff, monitoring both endpoints and your identities to see more of the environment, respond faster, and have better coverage. But this tool is designed to look for those suspicious logons after someone may have been phished, look for those inbox rules forwarding out or automatically reading them and throwing them into a conversation history folder, a folder none of us ever look at, but that's what threat actors are doing. And then we're looking even beyond that to see if there's privilege escalations, which means, are they changing you from a user to an admin? And is that an abnormal activity? Or even now further to say, hey, if you're signing on from the United States and you typically use a Mac device, but all of a sudden now you're signing on from South Africa with a Windows device, why is that? And alerting on that and detecting and saying, hey, this is legitimate, the password, the user, but now they're signing on from a completely different country, and that doesn't make sense. Why is that? And that's where our SOC team would come in. But I'll pass the rest over to Andrew to kind of elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah, so same concept, and you think about it, the EDR side is the endpoint detection and response, and on the MDR for M365, this is the managed detection and response for that identity itself. And really, when you think about this, most people have started to shift into these cloud environments, primarily because they're accessible, they're really easy to use, and they're super functional for businesses. But the piece that gets overlooked is that also makes the accessibility easy for those threat actors. So for us, think of this just like the camera system on your endpoint. This is now the camera system for your identities. We're monitoring all your users, not tracking where they're going and how they're moving and what they're actually doing. The goal here is to catch when a threat actor gains access to the account. So as Kyle mentioned there, right, we're looking at that suspicious login event. We're looking at those actual inbox rules. We're looking for privilege escalation. And basically what we're looking for is the context that says that this user identity, while maybe they are actually logging in appropriately or have gained access, is not actually that user. And the problem and the real thing that we've highlighted all throughout this presentation is the hard part is not to be able to detect something. You can detect 100 million different things. The thing is that is difficult about cybersecurity in general and all those threats that you saw is being able to weed out the good from the bad, because these threat actors, right, they're not trying to get caught. Our goal here is to identify that, hey, this login event or this potential user being compromised is bad. And ultimately, the investigation that's required behind that and the expertise to identify that that is a bad login is where we're providing and where that human-led investigation happens. Our analysts will then go through, look at all these potential detections. We will then go and add context to or ask for context from Braver and your teams. And ultimately, that then gives us the ability to go, this is actually a bad threat actor that's in the environment. And we do this by weeding out those false positives. So instead of wasting all your time looking at things that are just normal, so think of your users going on vacation. That could be completely normal, right? They've never logged in from Aruba, and now all of a sudden they are. That could be completely normal. They could just be traveling, happen to pull out their cell phone and connect to the corporate email. But what you didn't know is maybe there was other things that happened. And this is how we can weed that out. We weed out those suspicious logins. We go and investigate to determine, hey, is there context that we need or context we can provide? And then ultimately, can we identify that that user has been compromised or that identity has been compromised, and then stop it in its tracks? Present that back to Braver so that they can respond. And then ultimately, you guys have been saved from what Kyle mentioned there, potentially sending $100,000 out to somebody that you weren't intending to do so.
All right, everybody. So we are going to jump into the Huntress dashboard here. We're going to run through a couple things. I'll show you a few highlights I like to show within the dashboard. And then we're actually going to look at what an incident report looks like when we actually have something come into the Huntress dashboard. So like right for this start, this is a demo dashboard. None of this is real. This is all simulated data that allows us to show these types of instances and explain what we're looking at. So we're going to start covering the EDR and then the ITDR. And instead of me just using acronyms, I'm going to explain those really quickly. EDR, Endpoint Detection and Response. ITDR, Identity Threat Detection and Response. So EDR is going to be your endpoints, your agents, your physical devices. ITDR is going to be your Microsoft Cloud instances. So what you guys are using as far as your email and then how to sign on with that. We're starting the EDR side, and we'll talk about a couple things that overlap before I even really dig into that. And that's going to be what we do at Huntress outside of this dashboard. And that is going to be our 24/7 Security Operations Center team, or our MDR staff, our Managed Detection and Response team. So obviously we have all these great tools in here that are being used and utilized, but then we also have a team monitoring that 24/7. So that team is 24/7. They are all employed by Huntress, and we're doing that worldwide. So we have US, Canada, UK, and Australia all operating within their normal business hours. So we do what's called follow the sun model. So people who are supposed to be working at East Coast hours are, people who are supposed to be working their Australian business hours are doing that as well. So we don't have people up 24/7 rotating out 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. drag shifts and falling asleep when they should be working. All of our data is hosted here in the US. So while we may be a global operation for our actual humans that watch our tools, our data is all hosted here in the United States. If you guys have any other compliancy issues, we can definitely take this off the call and cover that in a little bit more detail to meet your specific needs. So we're going to start talking about a couple things inside the EDR dashboard space here. I want to start with the actual agent status. The reason why I like to point this out, because there's a couple important things to notate. Green is good. That means that your agent's working. Agent is installed just like any normal application would onto your computer. It is a very, very low pull. So what that means is that it is a very, very light agent. It's not going to slow your computer down. We're pulling in a lot of data, but really all we're doing is a data pass through with the agent. And then we're turning all of that, what we call raw data, that nonsense that's just a bunch of lines, numbers, and data and information. And we're contextualizing that on our side from a security perspective. And that's what allows our SOC team to actually do their job. Unresponsive basically means that your computer's been turned off long enough that it doesn't check in anymore. And that is the precursor of, hey, we're on there, but we don't know if it's turned on, so we don't have a lot of visibility. Outdated basically means a multitude of things, but at the end of the day, it basically means that your agent is out of date. It needs to be brought up to the most recent version. That could be because it's been turned off for too long, or it was restarting during a push for a refresh for the latest update. There are a couple of reasons why that could be. If your team ever reaches out to you saying, hey, we're going to get some updates on unresponsive or outdated agents, make sure we make that a priority. That way we can get those agents back up into a healthy status and being protected by the most recent version of Huntress. Last piece here is isolated. Basically, we are just talking about any device that hits a critical incident alert, and we had to isolate that device by our SOC team. So what does that all mean? Let's come here to active incidences. 3 buckets. That's how we alert: low, high, and critical. Critical are going to be instances where we see enough activity that justifies our SOC team to actually isolate one of your devices or users if we see that type of activity that justifies it. That's where you'll start seeing isolations come up. All this comes across in an incident report that we send. We'll take a look at that here in a couple of minutes, and I'll show you what that looks like. I'm going to talk about a few things inside of the EDR. So I did just kind of mention that it's a data pass-through tool. I know it doesn't sound very security-like, but let me explain a little bit further by hovering over process insights. We're not going to click into it because there's a lot of data and a lot of things to digest, and we leave that to the technical staff. So process insights basically means that all the process information coming on your computer, which at any company, any given day, could be hundreds of thousands to millions of processes occurring naturally, right? Just us sitting on this call here talking, thousands of processes occurring between all of our devices. So we are pulling in all of that data and bringing insight to it by contextualizing all of that raw process data and trying to correlate it to what we're seeing as some form of cyber attack, or if we see any type of attack like that. So this is where our MDR staff will respond when we see that, drawing that correlation. Even further, if we see small precursors, because threat actors like to leave breadcrumbs before they actually leave an attack, we might see those breadcrumbs and do what's called threat hunting. So we'll proactively look and try to find the solution to what we're seeing before we wait for the actual alert to come through. Threat actors work in a lot of different ways. So sometimes we're able to threat hunt first and then use our MDR services. And in other instances, the threat actor may be acting so quickly if they were able to gain access through a phishing email and get someone's credentials, to where we would have to be more on the MDR side. So that detection, response, and managing that response to the incident. Persistent footholds is sort of along the lines of process data, but when you guys restart a computer, or if you are up, or if you're turning it on for the first time, a lot of processes run too. So your computer can do what it needs to do. It's all these different processes that kick off at the same time. It's a pretty normal occurrence, but threat actors have actually found a way out to use those to their advantage so they can continuously stay in your computer even if you restart it. That way they don't have to start over from day one. We are very, very good at detecting these. This is one of our largest detection functions that we have at Huntress, and we constantly monitor and alert for those. Basically, all to say that when you guys turn your computer on and Huntress is installed, just know we are looking at a lot of things and we're making sure you're staying protected. Ransomware canaries is the last piece I want to touch on. You guys, pretty cool. Basically, tripwires, right? So if you guys, we call them ransomware canaries. If you ever heard canary in a coal mine, it's kind of that same concept. These are very easy to find files. And what I mean by that is all of you could accidentally stumble upon one of these because of how they're titled and what they're named by. The reason for that is if a threat actor, and hopefully this never happens to anybody on this call, the threat actor ends up getting the chance to exfiltrate files. The way they pull these ransomware canary files would be some of the first ones that they're pulling out, which is tripping that line, letting our SOC team know that, hey, we have a red alert situation, and they'll shut that entire environment down, or at least that device to contain the situation and report. So you guys, like I said, can't find this. If you do find it, close it out immediately. Don't make any edits. Don't move it or anything like that, because that'll actually end up triggering our SOC team to close you out of your computer. Moving on to ITDR, again, this is looking at your Microsoft licenses. So business email compromise is what we're looking for here. There's a lot of ways to describe what we're doing here. There's a lot of crazy things going on this dashboard, but what you guys need to know is that if we see a threat actor trying to gain access to your account, if they are trying to create mail forwarding rules and hide their activity right under your noses, that we're going to detect that and alert on it. So a quick scenario to kind of describe what this tool does is if you guys have ever seen, hopefully none of you personally experienced this, seen in the news or heard from someone else in another company that was like, hey, yeah, we changed our ACH routing number to, a completely different number that we're used to with this vendor, and $100,000 disappeared out of nowhere. It's basically someone becoming a victim of business email compromise. So what'll happen here is that if they get access to their account, they're able to kind of see these transactional emails and create what's called a mail forwarding rule, right? So sometimes you guys may mail forward to your personal emails. In the case a threat actor can get into your account, they can do the same thing, but they can look for the word ACH and they can figure out how to masquerade as someone to steal that information. So this tool is looking for activity like that and stopping it way before it even gets to the, hey, what's that new routing number? Let's get that set up. But at the end of the day, this is a great 1-2 punch combo from cloud and endpoint. I will pass it back over to the team to discuss a little bit more as far as deeper detail, but I did want to show you guys a report really quickly. So whether it's cloud or whether it's EDR, you're going to see one of these come across. This is basically what our SOC analyst has decided to write up and kind of talk about what's going on. This specific scenario, this was under the Springfield Power Organization under the entity or device Charlie. Charlie's computer looks like a fileless malware attack has occurred called Coveter. Very common, very well known. We can defend against this with ease. We just use this as a specific example because it's very easy to talk about. So we kind of list out what Coveter is, what we saw, our process insights data. So all that raw data we're pulling in and being able to turn it into a contextualized security incident. We're showing that work right here, showing you more on the incident report as well as remediation instructions. So what we're recommending the next steps be. And then any additional notes around Coveter and what we should be aware of when responding to this, as well as kind of showing our work, saying, hey, we saw some footholds and some processes occurring, and here's all the work that we saw that we're putting into this report. Once there, you can look up at review remediation plan. Our MDR staff is very talented at being able to actually set this up for you. So we're like, hey guys, this is what's going on. Here's what we see. Here's what needs to be remediated. If you click this approve button down here, it actually tasks the agent to clean it up itself, allowing for less time for the staff to come in, have to explore, do that remediation and that research. We're able to come in, provide this quick, easy fix. Obviously, there's still more work to be done. This isn't the last bit that we need to worry about, but we take on a lot of the heavy lifting, and that's the power of using an MDR tool. And that is really all I had to show you guys from the Huntress dashboard. Appreciate the quick run through and you guys paying attention to it.
So we just went through and talked about the EDR side. We talked about how we can do this on the endpoint. You saw in that demo as well how we're doing this for the identity itself. But know that this is part of the detection and response layer, right? There's still, how do we prevent this earlier on? How do we go through this guidance? How do we get, how do we further the full cybersecurity program as a whole? And what more can we do to help protect against this? Again, this is in the detection and response realm. So this is the camera systems. There's things that you could do to start preventing what actually is going on. And most of that, and I'm going to pivot here, starts with your identity, with user education, with that next piece, that what can the end user do to help better themselves, better protect their actual environment? How can you stay abreast to the actual incidents that are out there in the real world, and how can you get better at protecting your organization? With that, I'll pass that back over to Eric here to start talking about some of the training and education and how Braver handles that for your organizations.
Once again, thank everyone for running through that live demo with us. That was absolutely incredible. I would like to thank the Huntress team. Additionally, for everyone that is watching the webinar right now, I would like to make you aware that we actually have training and education materials, some of which we offer absolutely for free. You can find them on both our YouTube, and you can go to our website for additional materials there. We have free quarterly cybersecurity trainings and a template incident response and planning/training document that you can take advantage of and review for existing clients of ours. Please feel free to reach out, as we'd be happy to work with you to sort of customize and modify those to suit your business better. We also offer for clients phishing simulation and training opportunities to help protect the employees, give them additional knowledge and skills to help protect themselves, as some of the most attacked members of an organization, the employees. We want to make sure that they have all the opportunities and knowledge available to try to help protect themselves, so they can participate in the security of your organization. Also, we do this monthly for all of our existing clients, but we do a review and audit of all of their security policies on the Office 365 side and firewall, et cetera. But if you have any particular concerns in your active client or not, please feel free to reach out and let us know, and we can talk further about doing a more deep dive audit on those or going over those with you. Additionally, for clients, we do personalized supplementary training. So if you have particular products or particular platforms where you're nervous on security, possibly not necessarily security related, please feel free to reach out to us for additional details, and we would be happy to and love to work with you to talk about developing some trainings for you. So please, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask them. But if you don't have those questions here today, you can always give us a call at one of those numbers listed here on the screen. Scan the QR code, which will bring you over to our website. I think it's our contact form, and we can go from there. Thank you so much.